And welcome to the Carlisle Local School District Board of Education regular board meeting. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business as not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting. Mr. Bassler, call the roll.
Mrs. Milligan?
Here.
Mrs. McIntosh?
Here.
Mr. Jewell?
Here.
Mrs. Miller?
Here.
Mrs. Morris?
Here. And please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Vail, student and program recognition.
Thank you. Mr. Augustine couldn't make it tonight due to family illness, so we're just going to go with Gail French for our food service director.
Good evening.
Make sure that mic is on.
I turned it on right.
You will have before you, did you give them the reports?
No.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Oh, okay. Every year I have to turn in a report for the nutritional and telling the state of Ohio that we are following all the USDA guidelines, and that's what the report says, that we continue to follow the guidelines. I am very proud of our staff this year. They continue to work together really well. We just have a cohesive group, and we've not had much turnover. We just, and they work hard at providing a good meal for the students and relating to them. My elementary side, they dress up for different days, almost every day they dress up, and with hats and goofy things, so they just really relate to those kids well. This Carlisle School is up to 36% free and reduced this year, which is a little bit of a raise over the last few years. We currently have a new program that the state of Ohio is piloting, that they are allowing people that are getting
Reduced.
no, where they're getting the insurance, the Medicaid, that they now also will, there's a direct cert list for those students, and this is the first year they've done that. And that's probably where we've seen the increase of our free and reduced students at. So they piloted it this year. We're hoping that it'll stay in motion and that it'll be further down the road, remain available to all the students. We work very hard to stay abreast of what the USDA guidelines are for all that we offer. That's our snacks, our meals, our drinks, all of that has guidelines at the Smart Snack compliant that we follow every one of those guidelines. And this year, the last few years, luckily we've been able to stay with Domino's Pizza, which is our #1 selling day of the week. If we didn't serve that, I think we'd have a riot going on. But Domino's does serve a Smart Snack compliant pizza, so we have a whole grain crust, the reduced fat cheese, and the kids still love it, so we're very blessed in that. So Dr. Vail will be turning that report into the state tomorrow or after the meeting tonight, but that's all I have to say.
And I apologize. I don't know that I've ever provided the board with a report, but I will send that to them tomorrow. And you didn't tell me to, so I always do what I'm told.
I'm sorry. I
That's
thought
all right.
we did.
Not a problem.
I'm sorry.
Since it's not an action item, we don't vote on it, but
Well,
I will
that
get that in your hot little hands tomorrow. So
That threw me off, so.
Not a problem.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Gail.
Good recovery.
They do a great job. As I was telling Gail earlier, this is probably the first district I've been associated with where the food service has been in the black. Normally they're in the red, and the district has to bail them out at the end of the year so that they do finish in the black. But she's doing a great job down there. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good
Thank
food
you.
too. And that's all I have for that since John's not here tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any visitor comments?
Tim Humphreys, 489 Park Drive. The topic is the movement of people. When this beautiful campus was put together, it was required by code to put sidewalks in from property line to property line. And then for the longest time, there was comments made about the sidewalk on Fairview that kind of basically went to nowhere. As of Friday morning, there now is 69 feet of sidewalk that connects Fairview home to our campus. So I just wanted to give a thank you to On Grade Construction Services. They donated their time. They also got a donation of the 6 yards of concrete from SRM Materials, and including someone that stepped up and paid for the permit. That was almost $6,000 worth of project that was donated at no cost to Fairview Homes. So what used to be a sidewalk to nowhere is now their escape to possibly go almost anywhere. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and say thank you for having it as far as it went, and then the community took care of it and made it go even further. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Nice. Mr. Geister, Treasurer's Report.
Thank you, Mrs. Milligan. First thing, non-action item is an audit update. You received notification from the auditor in the last couple weeks. First about a fraud statement, which everybody was to complete and turn in. And you should have received, if you didn't find it yet in your email, something late this afternoon, which is called the engagement letter, which means the audit has officially begun. It officially begun with them asking me questions many weeks ago, but as far as notification to the district and put into place, you should have received an email late this afternoon directly from my auditor, Mr. Elfers, Greg Elfers. So we're in full swing with the audit. Typically have 3 people on the audit team, and it seems like all 3 will be asking for information on a daily basis, all about different topics on different things. So will keep us in our office moving in quite a few different directions, but fortunately able to chase down all the information that they need. And the sooner we get them done, the sooner they're out of here, is the way I look at it. So that's my audit update. I have a few action items for the month. First, I need approval for the minutes from the last regularly scheduled board meeting, which was October the 23rd.
Need a motion?
So moved.
First by Mr. Jewell. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Morris. Mr. Bassler?
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
Next is the financial report, which is part of your packet. I won't spend any time on it because I've got the 5-year forecast here in a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about finances. But I need an approval for the report.
Need a motion?
So moved.
First by Mrs. Miller. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. McIntosh. Mr. Bassler?
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Next, what that paragraph is saying, I'll paraphrase it. We work with the Southwestern Ohio EPC and do a consortium for purchasing our gas. This is the resolution that we need to pass to stay with that group of people to be able to leverage and get lower pricing on our gas.
Need a motion?
So moved.
First by Mr. Jewell. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Morris. Mr. Bassler?
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan.
Yes.
Then next, as part of your packet, is a 5-year forecast. Again, that's something that needs to be updated with the Ohio Department of Education twice a year, November after school begins, and then again in May as school ends, and basically puts out the financial condition of the district, which decisions are based upon. So I have that as part of your packet. Last meeting, I spent a little bit of time talking about the revenue side of things, when we're referring to the property taxes and the fact that the valuations are going to be going up next year when those come in, and then also a little bit about the Fair Funding Act and how they're going to potentially balance or work together in the future. I won't spend a whole lot of time on that now as we move forward. On my forecast, I think you like me to be conservative with the revenues, and I believe I have done that. I have increased the property taxes for next year, kept them the same after that as we move forward until we see what those actually are going to be and how that affects the district. And then the same thing with state funding. I've kept it flatline just because I don't know. I don't want to be wrong in the other direction. Feel with good confidence that we're going to stay at least where we are, but I don't really want to be wrong by giving us any projection in the future. So wanted to do my forecast that way with the revenue. Those are our two major line items. The third major line item is the income tax. Fortunately, our district, our income tax collections have gone up each year and are looking to do so as we move forward. Expense-wise, we just finished a contract negotiation with our employees last year. So we know this year what our raise percentage is. We know next year what our raise percentage is, and then the following year we know what our raise percentage is. So we're able to put those into the forecast with certainty. Following that, in year 4 and year 5, I put in 4%, which is a 2% raise, and 2%, about 2% for steps. Again, that's where I like to be, where we're in non-negotiated years and don't know where we're at. We could be higher than that. We could be lower than that. We'll see what happens over the next 3-year period. Other than that, it's mostly inflationary increases. There is one increase in purchase services from this year to next year. It's a pretty hefty increase, about $400,000. And the reason for that is because we are using some of our ESSER money right now to pay for some things that are in purchase services. So our ESSER money is paying for our additional school psych and our mental health therapists that we have for our students here. And once the ESSER money is used and gone, then those will become general fund expenses following this year. So other than that, bottom line, we're going to bring in more money than what we spend this year. In year 2, it's going to be about break even. And then following after that, year 3, 4, and 5, staying with these conditions that I'm conservative one way on revenue, conservative the other way on expenses. Then we start our deficit spending slowly. But in 5 years, we still have a good carryover and have a good balance. So thanks to all the voters who renewed the levy that we had on the renewal ballot, and we're able to continue to collect that $1 million on an annual basis. We're able to be in a healthy position right now. So if there aren't any specific questions about the forecast, then I'll need an approval to file this with the Ohio Department of Education.
First, I need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh. Need a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Jewell. Mr. Bassler?
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Morris.
Yes.
Thank you. And then last, I have a donation of $2,000 from the Carlisle Say Soccer Program to our varsity program for new uniforms for both the boys and girls soccer programs.
Okay. Need a motion.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Morris. Need a second.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Miller. Mr. Bassler?
Mrs. Morris,
Yes.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh,
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's my report.
All right, thank you. Dr. Bale?
Thank you. I have a number of non-action items first. Thank you, Ms. Milligan. First was the compliance with the nutritional standards report, and will submit that tomorrow to the state along with the documentation, and then make sure you guys get a copy of that as well. Basically saying that we are compliant with all the nutritional things we're supposed to do. Backtracking a little bit, this is from April. I don't know why I didn't report this in the April board meeting other than not being here, but I just want to let you know that Tom Wolf, who was a former board member at West Carrollton High School, I don't know if any of you know him, but he knows a few people in our staff. He let us know about a UD versus Wright State game last spring, April 18th. And he secured a box for us, so our kids, our baseball team, Mr. Hawkins was able to take the baseball team to that game that was played between Wright State and UD at the Dragons Field. So I knew Tom from way back when, so I talked to him and found out that, and I just wanted to relay that to him and thank Tom for keeping an eye out and taking care of us in that manner. So that was something nice from him. A few other things. ESI was in with Thanksgiving break. They went in and put in some speakers in different places in the building. Also made sure that our speakers were working in our hallways, our extended learning areas, our ELAs, any places where we were having issues, checking them for connectivity and making sure that in. Had you been in over break while they were playing lovely elevator music over the speakers nonstop, they are working. So they do have a few more things that they've got to get couple of the speakers here in the auditorium. They've got to make sure they get connected, and they're waiting on a couple speakers to be shipped in. So slowly and surely getting caught up with everything that we'd like to have happen. Also upcoming, the 4th, the high school choir with Ms. Shively in charge is going to be performing at the Chamber Christmas Lunch. That's going to be at Modulo on December 4th. So that's a nice honor for them to be able to perform there. Speaking of choir, then we'll continue with that. On December 19th, the 3rd grade is going to be performing here at 7 p.m. And I'll get that to you again, but I didn't want to wait till the meeting at the 18th to let everyone know about that. So the 19th at 7 p.m., 3rd grade choir concert in here. Also, DC trip was a success. They got there safely, got back safely, and I think they brought everybody back. We were very honored to have 4 of our students, Nadia Garcia, Logan Judd, Caden Salyer, and Lucas Winkler, to lay the wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So that was a neat honor for our kids, and there's an article in the paper, the local paper recently, and there's going to be another one next time about, we had 3 generations of a couple of our families there as well, so that'll be a nice follow-up. And the only other thing, non-action, just remind everyone that our December board meeting is going to be on the 3rd Monday, since we'll be on break during the 4th Monday, so it'll be December 18th will be our December board meeting. So that's all the non-action items that I had, Ms. Milligan. A couple action items. First one is general district business. We've got our first reading of policies. If you think we sent those to you, those are in your packet. As I told you, most of the changes were revisions or replacements. A lot of them were just vernacular, some wordsmithing, and just making sure that they were consistent as far as terminology, both with the policy and with the administrative guideline. We only had 2 new policies, 5337 and 6240, and those were mandated for us to have in our policy manual. So if you have any questions on those board policies, you can let me know, and then we'll hopefully have the second reading in December and approve those. Thank you. If you could approve the first reading of those.
Need a motion?
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Joel. Mr. Basta?
Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Thank you. We had certified retirement. We want to approve the resignation of Donna Dunkman as first grade teacher at the end of the 23-24 school year, and we certainly want to thank her for all our service to the district and wish her luck as she moves on, but she still has to finish the year strong, or we won't let her go. We can put in another year, so we could approve her resignation.
So moved.
First by Mrs. Morris. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Jewell. Mr. Bassler?
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Thank you. We've got some classified employment. Approved Mike Gray as sub-educational classroom aide, approved Donna Waller as sub-educational classroom aide, and approved Kara Parker as a sub-educational classroom aide.
Need a motion?
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Jewell. Mr. Bassler?
Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And the last action item I have is supplemental resignation. We approve the resignation of Scott Clodfelter as the head football coach and thank him for his many years of service with our young men on the football team.
Need a motion?
So moved.
First by Mrs. Miller. Need a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Morris. Mr. Bassler?
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all the action items I have for tonight. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Mrs. McIntosh, any legislative report?
They're still going through the same things they've been going through. It's talking more like Dan was talking about taxation and things like that.
Okay.
They're not making much progress.
All right. Miami Valley CTC had their regular board meeting on the 14th, and it was just a regular board meeting. Any old business? And any new business? No? I need a motion to go into executive session with no action to follow.
So moved.
First by Mrs. McIntosh. Need a second? Second. Second by Mrs. Miller. Mr. Bassler?
Mrs. McIntosh?
Yes.
Mrs. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mrs. Morris?
Yes.
Mrs. Milligan?
Yes.
Time in executive session is 6:22.
Thank you.